you could pump a mag into me right now and never wake the guy in the next room. Of course, that would eliminate your opportunity for repeat business.
The Uzi Submachine Gun, easily one of the most iconic firearms in modern history, an Israeli weapon, exported to over 90 countries, with many different variants and knockoffs. It's been used in dozens of conflicts, from the late 50s to present times, which is no surprise. Over 10 million Uzis have been manufactured and sold throughout the world, both legally and otherwise. That's more than any other submachine gun ever made.
The best things in life are free.
In the movies, just as in real life, the Uzi is prolific. So let's take a look at why this weapon was so popular in real life and on film, and highlight a few of the many films it's been featured in.
Hold on, wait. Stay where you are, German.
He's got a gun.
I know.
Many people associate the Uzi with Hollywood, with every action flick in the 80s and early 90s featuring the iconic must-have Uzi for shootouts. The Uzi has been in the hands of countless movie stars, some more than once. Just to name a few, you have Ed Harris, Christopher Walken, Chuck Norris, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger on several occasions, and even Robin Williams of all people. Far before Hollywood took an interest in the Uzi, this weapon was being adopted by many different nations after Israel started producing and using them in the 1950s, actually able to prove their weapon in combat. The Uzi was first used in the Suez Crisis in 1956, and would be used significantly by Israeli commandos through the 60s and 70s. FN started manufacturing Uzis for European markets as early as 1958.
Oh, boys, now you're talking my language.
The Uzi was developed by Uzi Gal in the late 1940s, only shortly after World War II. Israel wanted a cheap, light, accurate, and most importantly a home-built submachine gun, having newly created their nation with hostilities at every border.
Well, it's much better.
One of the reasons for the Uzi's success was that it used stamped metal in its construction, so it was cheap to build. It was also one of the first submachine guns to use a telescoping bolt, allowing the barrel to be moved far back into the receiver and the magazine to be housed in the pistol grip, allowing for a heavier, slower firing bolt in a shorter, better balanced weapon. The Uzi fired from an open bolt, improving cooling during periods of sustained fire, but open bolt designs were more susceptible to sand and dirt. The rate of fire was 600 rounds a minute. The mini and micro Uzis developed in the 80s had a much higher rate of fire, having a shorter bolt. The position of the magazine in the grip allowed for hand-to-hand reloading of the weapon, which can make reloading very quick and easy, without having to look at the firearm, at least in theory. This is particularly valuable if using and reloading the weapon in the dark or in active combat.
Is that an Uzi?
Hey, you know, that would make a great TV commercial, wouldn't it? Excuse me, is that an Uzi? Why, yes it is.
I can't believe this guy.
Self-defense is no laughing matter.
The size also meant the Uzi was concealable and ideal for urban environments or clearing buildings and homes. The Uzi would be used by Israeli support troops, tankers, officers, etc., but again most notably used by commandos. Operation Entebbe, also known as Operation Thunderbolt, would be one such famous raid carried out by Israeli commandos to rescue 100 hostages from a hijacked Air France flight on July 3, 1976. The flight was hijacked by members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and flown to Uganda, supported by the local government, including dictator Idi Amin. The commando mission, which took place in Uganda by 100 Israeli commandos, was largely a success. Watch Raid on Entebbe and Operation Thunderbolt, both from 1977, covering this real and successful hostage rescue.
I'm going to kill you.
I see.
Two can play at that game.
The most quality production featuring Israeli forces using the Uzi takes place during the 1973 Israeli raid on Beirut, which was largely in retaliation for the Munich Olympic massacre of 1972. Munich from 2005 is an interpretation of the events, a quality production showing the effectiveness of the Uzi by Israeli commandos. The Uzi sometimes gets credited for being the first gun of its kind, smaller yet as effective as previous World War II machine guns. However, Czech SA-23 submachine guns of a similar design were being produced prior to the Uzi. The SA-25 is shown here being used by a Cuban revolutionary in Che from 2008. However, the Uzi had the advantage of not being a Soviet bloc firearm, giving it a wider market to be sold in.
Would you like a drink?
Maybe something light.
In the United States, the weapon was used by the Secret Service from the 1960s to the early 1990s. It was in fact in 1981 when the Uzi really became a famous weapon in the US, when an American Secret Service agent pulled one from his jacket during an assassination attempt of President Ronald Reagan. This took place during a speaking engagement packed with press, so there are several famous photos of the soon-to-become iconic Uzi. A similar situation took place 2 years later, known as the Augusta National Golf Course incident, again bringing attention to the Uzi in the press. Likely this incident inspired use of the weapon in films such as Assassination with Charles Bronson, playing a Secret Service agent armed with an Uzi, or even Clear and Present Danger starring Harrison Ford. The mini and micro Uzis were introduced in the 1980s due to increased popularity and demand for the concealable weapon. The mini weighed 2.7 kilograms or 6 pounds, and the micro 1.6 kilograms or 3.3 pounds. All Uzi variants, despite their size, are designed to be comfortably fired with two hands, though Uzis are frequently fired with one hand on film. Firing this weapon one-handed greatly reduces accuracy. The size of the Uzi also lends Hollywood to consistently showing this weapon being dual-wielded. There is almost no circumstance outside the Matrix where this would be accurate or controllable. The Uzi is an effective weapon used close to the body, with both hands, fired from the hip or using the sights. If firing from the hip, the stock can be clamped to one side using an elbow. Using the sights in short controlled bursts is always preferable. And as one side note, if you are Chuck Norris, you can use up to 6 Uzis at one time. The effective firing range was about 200 meters for an Uzi. The Uzi could come with a wooden stock, but the most iconic version of the Uzi was the one with the folding metal stock. Folding stocks in general, having moving parts, are less stable than wood stocks, but certainly help with concealability. Props to filmmakers who show actors using their stocks on film.
Good. Right on schedule.
In the 80s, the Uzi carbine was the popular civilian version of this iconic weapon. It was semi-automatic, though could be converted, and it had a longer barrel. You can see Emilio Esteban buying the carbine variant in Wisdom from 1986. He later illegally modifies it. It's a decent bank robbery film, also starring Demi Moore.
What the hell are you doing, Leon?
He ain't no killer.
Not yet, no.
The Uzi 9mm?
You know your weapons, buddy.
The scene where Arnold Schwarzenegger is shown buying an Uzi in Terminator. He is in fact buying the military variant not legally sold in the US, though Arnold is no stranger to acquiring Uzis in many films.
Doug.
The films of the 80s and 90s have really made this a popular weapon. But what did other nations outside of Israel think of the Uzi? It's generally reported as being accurate for its time, in short controlled bursts. It can be easily converted to fire other ammunition, aside from the 9mm, such as .45 ACP. It was reliable, though it could jam with too much exposure to sand in desert combat. something that was experienced during the Six-Day War's Sinai campaign.
I think I respected you. How could you do something so vicious?
It was easy, my dear. You forget I spent 2 years as a building contractor.
Safety had been a complaint by some militaries. Safeties for the Uzi were a selector switch and grip safety, and the selector switches were known for easily moving inadvertently. The film Falling Down has an interesting scene, showing the grip safety compressed by rubber bands, allowing the weapon to be fired, even if awkwardly gripped. Ultimately, the Uzi was famous for being one of the first small submachine guns to load magazines into the grip. The compactness and ease of production of the gun was hard to match in the 1950s and 60s. With stock and fully loaded with 9mm ammunition, the gun weighed 4 kilograms or 9 pounds, which was actually not that light compared to other submachine guns, though the micro and mini Uzis were significantly lighter. The Uzi did what it was designed to do, and it did it well: clear houses and bunkers at close range, and be a defensive backup gun for troops in secondary roles, such as artillery gunners or drivers. When used by special forces or commandos, it was expected that they were highly trained on it, and kept the Uzi perfectly serviced. These weapons were selected with care and mission specific. Today, modern armies have phased out the Uzi, including Israel, but with the sheer number manufactured, it continues to pop up in conflicts around the world.
Uzi 9mm.
Oh,
Remember, finger off the trigger till you're ready to shoot.
thank you very much.
No problem.
All the sex and violence on the screen has gone too far for me. I'm fed up with it.
Alright, I'm Johnny. Thanks for watching this brief on the Uzi. There is a lot of historic information on this weapon, and a ton of movies, so I'm sorry I couldn't include them all. Equally, there's a lot of opinion on this being a great weapon, with some saying it's an overrated weapon. Feel free to give any insight in the comments section below, and I'll see you in the next video.
Anything else?
Phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range.
Hey, just what you see, pal.